Welcome to Our Canada, Our Future. I'm Aaron Woodrick. On today's show, we're going to be talking about a proposed healthcare reform that could save many Canadian lives, paid plasma collection. And to chat about this issue, I'm very pleased to be joined by Peter Jaworski, a professor of business ethics at Georgetown University. Peter, I want to thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Aaron. I appreciate it very much.
Peter, I think a lot of people might be familiar with the idea of blood donations, blood collections. They might be a little less familiar with plasma. So could you maybe just sort of break down for us, what's the difference between blood and plasma?
Well, blood everybody is familiar with, as you said, but plasma, actually I have a container here. This will be a good visual to show you. So this is a plasma collection device. As you can see, it's very large. And what we do is we hook people up to a machine, just like a blood donation. But as they collect the blood, they separate out the plasma, which is the yellow part of your blood. And then we keep that in that container. Inside of that plasma are proteins, important proteins, including immunoglobulin, albumin, a variety of different clotting factors, and so on. And what we do is we collect that plasma and then we turn it into medicine, into therapies, right? So that's the difference.
Interesting. And I have to ask you, given that you're an ethics professor, what sort of led to your interest in, you do a lot of work in the area of plasma collection. What led to your interest in this area?
Well, there's a couple of things that piqued my interest here. One is a former student of mine was interested in bone marrow donation, so he and I used to talk a lot about apheresis, which is one of the procedures that we can get bone marrow from people. I took an interest in that. I looked it up, discovered plasmapheresis is the more popular kind of apheresis. There was a political issue going on in Canada at the time. I'm a Canadian, so I had an interest in that as well. More personally, though, my nephew and my niece were born prematurely. They were actually triplets. One of them did not make it, unfortunately. But Summer and Garrison both made it, and both of them required plasma therapies during surgeries, right? So it became personal over time. I've met a lot of patients who depend on the therapies that are made from blood plasma. And so my interest has only grown.
Very interesting. And so your concern, of course, is about collecting it and I presume making sure that patients have there's enough plasma to go around for the people that need to use it. And on that note, you mentioned you're Canadian, so I assume you take interest in Canadian policy. How does Canadian governments collect plasma right now?
Yeah, before I answer that question, something you said is really important, and I think it bears repeating. Namely, the moral objective and the moral point of having a plasma collection system in the first place is to collect enough plasma to make sure that all the patients that need therapies that are made from plasma can have access to them, right? So that's something that I want to repeat. And then if you could repeat your question there, Aaron, I'll answer it.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about how, I know that it's largely provincial responsibility in Canada. What is the current system in Canada for collecting plasma?
Well, Canada has a mixed system. It depends on the province. Like you said, it is a provincial jurisdiction. So, for example, Ontario and British Columbia, they have a ban, a law called the Voluntary Blood Donations Act that prohibits commercial companies from collecting plasma using compensation. So in Ontario and British Columbia, Canadian Blood Services collects the plasma, and only Canadian Blood Services is legally permitted to collect that plasma. In the other provinces, and I should say in Quebec, it's the same system, but the organization there is called Héma-Québec. It performs the same function as Canadian Blood Services. Now, in all of the other provinces, there is no law banning commercial companies from coming in and collecting plasma and compensating donors for their donation. Alberta, in fact, in December of 2020, they repealed the Voluntary Blood Donations Act, and so they have a mixture. They have Canadian Plasma Resources, a private company that collects plasma in Edmonton and Calgary and soon in Red Deer and Lethbridge, as well as Canadian Blood Services collecting plasma alongside them. Other provinces are like this as well. Saskatchewan, Manitoba has had a commercial plasma collector since 1984. So they've been doing this for a very long time, working side by side with Canadian Blood Services. So that's the system. We have a mixture across the country. It's different from places like the United States, where everywhere commercial companies operate side by side with not-for-profit collectors.